Listen up! Strap yourself in! There's a lot of information. Try not to let it overwhelm you. It might, but try. Alright, fam. Before we even begin anything else, we gotta talk about the watercolor paint. Because, well, we're talking about watercolor paints, and if you're gonna start out, you kind of need to know a few things about what you're getting yourself into. So let's talk about what you need to know before you even begin with the whole watercolor paints thing. Watercolor paints come in two types. Pans, there it goes, and tubes. Watercolor pans are easy enough to remove from a painting kit like this one. See, you remove the bar right here, and then you pull the pan out, and it's a little bit hard for me with my sausage fingers, but there it is! Easy enough to remove. And watercolor tubes you usually put into a watercolor palette like this one. You just open up the cap, and, well, that one's a little hard to open, so why don't we open this one instead? There. See, easy to open. And then you squeeze it out. But before you make that big decision of where that color needs to go, you gotta think about it, because once you squeeze that color out into that palette, that's where it's gonna stay. Unless you remove it, but let's be real. Removing dry watercolor paint from palette like this, it's a chore, baby. It's a chore. There it goes. Yeah, look at that delicious color. Screw the cap back onto that tube because you don't want the paint to dry inside the tube. That would be just miserable for later on. And of course, you can take empty pans and put tube colors into them. So the pre-made pans like these, well, they're kind of just for convenience. Artist colors are sold individually, though there are a lot of starter kits out there that are very good, like the Cotman Field Set. That one is awesome. Pans come in full or half sizes. The ones I have in this palette right here are half-size pans. Notice how, against a full-size pan, they're about half-size. And that would make sense, wouldn't it? Tube paint tends to come in 5ml tubes, 14 or 15 milliliter tubes, and 37 milliliter tubes, though both sizes are sold individually and in sets. Traditionally, watercolor paints consist of pigment and a gum arabic binder with a rewetting agent like glycerin and a fungicide like formaldehyde, along with fillers and brighteners that goose up the color and weaken it if it happens to be a little too strong. A lot of the time, colors are referred to by their common name. For instance, Hansa Yellow Medium. That refers to a chemical family of yellows called arylides, and they're all marketed as Hansa Yellow. Though sometimes a manufacturer will call a color by a trade name. A trade name is just a fancy term that they made up for a color for the purposes of marketing, i.e. competition, because the art supply market has some stiff competition, bro! A good example of that is Scarlet Lake. Scarlet Lake refers to a mercury-based color we saw back around the 1800s or so. But I guarantee you, there is no mercury whatsoever in this color. Anything with hue on the end of the name on the label means that it's an imitation of the color whose name is on the label. Sometimes that's because the color is just too expensive to make the real thing, or else the color that we're talking about was just too impermanent for it to be used. So, obviously, sometimes it's a good thing when you have a hue. Not all hues are labeled accordingly, though. Sometimes a color has just been out of the game for so long that the color that a manufacturer whips up is no longer a hue, it's just the name of the color. And sometimes the manufacturer just doesn't feel like putting the word hue on the label. That happens too. You should definitely try to paint with the best quality paint that you can afford. Obviously, artist quality paint is going to be the best quality paint because it's intended for professionals. But if you have to save a few bucks and start with student paint, there's absolutely no shame in that because everybody's got to start someplace, right? And student paint is still very, very excellent. Here's a few brands you can choose from. Winsor & Newton. This is my favorite brand and a lot of other people's favorite brand by far. Their tubes come in 5ml, 14ml, and some of them come in 37ml, but not all of them. They have a middle-of-the-road price. It's not too cheap, but it's not too expensive either. Colors are classed from series 1 to 5. 5 is the most expensive, and boy, as soon as you encounter a series 5 color, you'll see why, because wow. Tube colors are considered by a lot of artists to be harder to re-wet than the pans are, but I think that the tube colors are made according to the original formulas, so some colors are easier to re-wet than others. Winsor & Newton also makes Cotman, which is very inexpensive. They come in 8 milliliter and 21 milliliter tubes, as well as pan sets. And if you want to choose one of those to start out with, that's a great deal. Their Cotman Field Box set is excellent. Grumbacher offers their Finest and Academy lines. The Academy line is their student line. They have a very good value. Most colors are very permanent. The Finest comes in 14 milliliter tubes, and the Academy comes in 7.5 milliliter tubes. They're all very well pigmented, and they have a large selection of colors. Pretty modestly low price. Rembrandt has a huge selection of colors. They come in 20 milliliter tubes, so a little bigger than your average Winsor & Newton and Grumbacher tube. Their price is about middle of the road. Most colors are permanent. Royal Talons, the company that makes Rembrandt, also makes Van Gogh. Van Gogh has extremely low prices. They're all very permanent colors, and they come in 10 milliliter tubes. And those are all the brands that I really want to focus on right now, because I really want to focus on the brands that offer an artist line and a student line for all the people out there who are looking for more affordable options. Now, let's talk about some of the related mediums. But be warned that these related mediums tend to be a little more impermanent than watercolor. So, if you're going to use them, approach them with caution. The first one is gouache. Gouache is also known as opaque watercolor or body color. They have the same ingredients as transparent watercolor, the big difference being that there's a higher pigment density to them, and there's white chalk that's been added for opacity. Most watercolor manufacturers you see out there will also manufacture a brand of gouache, like M. Graham makes a brand of gouache, and Winsor & Newton makes a brand of gouache. Most watercolor manufacturers make a brand of gouache. But the standards of permanence for gouache are a lot lower than they are for, say, watercolor or oil painting or acrylic. Gouache is usually meant for designers or illustrators. So colors are formulated for brilliance rather than impermanence, because the illustrations that are done with gouache are intended to be reproduced. Watercolor sticks are basically water-soluble crayons that you can draw with like crayons and blend with water. Colors are made from the same stuff that's in the watercolor paint, so it's light fast. Winsor & Newton makes them, so does Daniel Smith, and a few other brands make them too. They're relatively inexpensive. Now, watercolor sticks are not impermanent, although some of them might use an impermanent color like alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson is a very popular color that is also very impermanent, and you'll hear a lot about it the more you keep painting and the more you operate in artist circles. Watercolor pencils are similar to crayons, except they have a colored pencil texture instead of a crayon texture. The permanence on these is ambiguous though, because the colored pencil manufacturers don't really release any information about their pigments or the permanence thereof. Liquid watercolors are another thing that illustrators like to use a lot of the time, illustrators and designers. They look like ink bottles. They even have an eyedropper in them. One of the more popular ones is Dr. P.H. Martin. And ironically, Dr. P.H. Martin is also one of the more light-fast lines out there. Dr. P.H. Martin is very light-fast. They're typically intended for art that's made for reproduction too, and they're frequently impermanent. So if you use something other than Dr. P.H. Martin, you really need to check the labels and see if that color that you want to use is going to be permanent. Now that wasn't so bad, was it? No, baby, no. That was great. You did such a good job. And now, guess what? You got introductory knowledge to watercolor paints along with associated mediums. Feels pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah, I bet it does. Next time we're going to talk a little bit more about the hardware, because You gotta get all your ducks in a row, and you gotta know about this stuff before you begin, because I don't want to set you up to fail. I'm gonna set you up to succeed, and succeed you shall. But you gotta be patient, and you gotta follow along. Now, I'm gonna leave you with a bit of homework. You gotta get a few watercolor paints. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. I know this is scary. It's real scary, but don't be scared, because I'm going to tell you what you need to get in order to begin. I want you to keep it simple. I want you to keep it simple. And after you get the paints, go ahead and play around with them a little bit. It's fine. Go ahead. But don't waste too much paint, though. We need to get to work. So, here are the colors I want you to get. I want you to get a phthalo blue. I recommend Winsor blue green shade. Okay? And then, I want you to get a quinacridone rose. I recommend permanent rose from Winsor & Newton. Winsor blue green shade was also from Winsor & Newton. And then I want you to get Winsor yellow. That's benzimidazolone yellow. Okay? Now, if you can find those colors from another manufacturer, go right ahead. But I'm telling you right now that those colors are very inexpensive, and I think you can make it work. If not, hit me up, and I'll give you some other suggestions. But I think after you get those colors, we'll be able to really start painting. All right. Now, thanks for watching. I'm so glad you could join me today. I hope you got a lot from this, and I think you're going to get a lot more from this. We are going to have such a blast together, and this is going to be such a long series. But you stick with it, and you're going to own it. You're going to master watercolor. I promise you. You will master it. It seems impossible now. It seems like the hardest thing you've ever done. It will be. Watercolor painting is tough, bro. But, like I say, you can do it. All right. I'm going to head out now because I'm a little hungry, a little dehydrated. I've been sitting under a hot light for a long time. With love from me to you, I'll see you soon. And happy painting. Bye-bye now.